Now on Sports Day, full-on footy analysis with Daniel Hoyne. Thanks to Champion Data, the story behind the game.
Hoyne, as we welcome you in, we've got to get to the elephant in the room straight away, off the top. A couple of weeks ago, we asked you for your All-Australian team, and I'm sure the feedback has been strong for you this week. How's your week been with the news that Brodie Grundy was dropped?
No. It's
Was there feedback?
I only wish we had been asked for the All-Australian team a week later because he wouldn't have been in it. So we would have.
Who would have been in it?
No. So if the All-Australian team was to be happening right now, and the updated All-Australian team would actually surprisingly have Max Gawn in the team now. Yeah. So you would have mentioned. I did mention a couple of weeks ago when I was doing it, the gap between the 5 ruckmen in the competition. There was absolutely nothing in it that can change week to week. But I must admit, Kane, we did happen to have a laugh. I sent a message around to our guys just saying, "You're bloody kidding me, aren't you? Grundy's been dropped, and we've just gone with our All-Australian team 2 days earlier." So.
What's his form like as a forward?
No, he has performed below expectation as a forward this year. Max has performed only slightly above expectation, but nowhere
expectation as a ruckman forward, not as a forward.
No, as a forward. Okay. Yeah, right. No, we don't really care if you're a ruckman playing forward or if you're a key defender playing forward. You're still playing forward. So
it's not going to work. Holistically, this choice to turn Brodie Grundy into a forward at the age of 29 is probably not going to work.
No, something's going to have to change pretty considerably in what, on the evidence that we've got over a number of years now in terms of the return that both Collingwood and Melbourne have been able to generate from Grundy's time inside forward 50.
It sounds like it's got to work, though, according to Tom Brown, who had some insight into the Brodie Grundy contract, that if he goes to another club, Collingwood are off the hook.
Oh, okay, I haven't heard that, but I mean, all you can do is just look at the evidence in terms of what's actually in front of you right now, and I think
You don't deal in contracts?
I don't deal in contracts. I got no idea what's happening in the contract world. I just got a fair idea in terms of what's happening in the data world, G and Kane. So that's all we can go off.
Okay, give us your overall observations.
So overall observation is, we talked a couple of weeks ago about what Collingwood are doing at the moment in terms of their ability to play this ball movement game that we haven't seen anyone play to this level in, a 5-year period. So they're averaging over 45 points per game over the last 10 weeks in terms of their ability to be able to move the ball from one end of the ground to the other, which is just ridiculous. And it's sort of, I've sort of been really interested just to watch what the competition are actually going to be doing in terms of are they going to be coming on board the Collingwood ball movement train? And over the last 6 weeks, there's a couple of teams in the competition now that have significantly shifted in terms of their ball movement method when coming out of D50. So Geelong have increased their corridor use over the last 6 weeks by 11%. Carlton have increased it by 7%. Brisbane and the Dogs have increased it by 5% each. Brisbane and the Dogs used the corridor the second and the least of any team in the competition before this period. Geelong used it the 4th least in the competition, and Carlton used it the 6th least in the competition. And then as a result of these 4 teams alone, significantly increasing their corridor use, they're all top 5 along with Collingwood for scoring from the back half over the last 6 weeks. So we've been waiting just to see whether or not the shift in being a strong forward half team and scoring the majority of your score off the back of creating forward half turnovers and creating forward half stoppage, at some stage was that going to shift? And Collingwood are the ones at the moment that are shifting that profile. And now over the last 6 weeks, we've seen some other teams now
Giants
come along with that profile. The Giants are moving it really well, but a lot of their score is still coming off the back of their forward half work. So that's the observation at the moment, just to keep an eye on a certain few teams. Are we going to see more aggressive corridor use to generate more score coming out of your ball movement game?
It doesn't surprise because, sides, particularly Collingwood, are now playing like state of origin sides or the top line sides of the 80s. And that was when scores were coming from, a lot more coming from defence, and significantly, forwards were kicking 100 goals. As those scores diminished from defence, the 100-goal kicker disappeared like the dodo.
Yeah, no, they did. And we're probably not going to see a 100-goal kicker again, and I don't think that we need to, but I just think if we're able to see this increase of corridor use and ball movement game by a lot of teams, it's going to be great to watch for the remaining 6 home and away games and then the final series.
Take us through your 7 main talking points, Hoyne. We'll start with the Blues. The lid is off.
Yeah, so I just wanted to rehash something that we spoke about on this show a couple of weeks ago. So after the Essendon game where Carlton lost, their 8th of 9 games, we mentioned something around about, sort of looking at what Melbourne did in 2020 and sort of looking at Melbourne as the blueprint is to not throw away a season, because Melbourne's season at the halfway stage of the 2020 period was, looking, disastrous again, and people were criticising what they did, and they shifted their method, they shifted their personnel, they came home hard to just miss finals, but then they were able to launch into their 2021 season. I thought Carlton could have been a little bit the same. Ironically, after that Essendon loss, 4 or 5 weeks ago, they've gone on to win 4 games in a row by 50-plus points. At the halfway stage of 2020, where Melbourne were in dire straits, they then won their next 3 games by 50-plus points as well. And then they got on this roll and everyone got really excited. But then they dropped those 2 games in Cairns to Fremantle and to Sydney, and they just missed finals by percentage. And people were critical of those, of them losing those 2 games. There's every chance here that Carlton still might not play finals, and they might drop a game to Gold Coast or to GWS or to whoever it is, and that might cost them a final spot. And people might be critical of them here. But I think what you're seeing now, if you're a Carlton supporter, is enough of an evidence and enough of a blueprint to launch into 2024. Not often do you lose 8 of 9 games and play finals, so they might slip up at some stage, but there's ball movement games, so to be the number 1 ball movement team in the competition over the last 6 weeks, they've got their contest game, they've got their clearance game, and like Melbourne in 2020, they've slightly shifted a couple of magnets that have been sort of really important to be able to help their ball movement and their territory game as well. So,
give me the magnet shifts.
So Lockie Fogarty coming into the team to play as this small forward pressure player. He's not going to be a highly regarded player on the outside, but plays an important role. Cottrell and David Cunningham joining him inside that forward 50 to play such an important role. Brodie Kemp, like the Adam Tomlinson role in 2020, he's now become their second key defender. And playing alongside Wiedering, that's now allowed Wiedering to be this really impactful interceptor behind the ball. And then moving Doherty to a wing. So now Doherty and Akers are now patrolling those wings, just like Melbourne did in 2020 when they moved Brayshaw out to the wing as well. So there's a lot of similarities there between what Melbourne and Carlton are doing, and people will go at me here. They might not win the flag next year. I'm not saying that they're going to win the flag, but there's enough evidence there as a Carlton supporter to just you might slip up over the next couple of weeks, but don't be too devastated if that happens.
So another pre-season of hype around the Blues. Is that what
Carlton
you're
to win the flag. Carlton to win the flag next year.
The whole
says Hoyne.
pre-season, we're going to have to hear.
It's a ripper.
Can you smell what they're cooking, or whatever that dumb slogan was they had a couple of years ago? But the point on them as well, everything you said is accurate. Their good players are playing well. As simple as that sounds, their good players are now gone from ordinary form to sensational form, and we're looking at Wiedering and Walsh is back, and Feard and Cripps, and what he's done has been enormous, and Curnow starting to look like the player that he was in the first part of the year, so that helps as well. Right, the Bombers were embarrassed in the first quarter.
Yeah, no, they were, and they were, pretty much embarrassed for the whole game to lose by 70-odd points or whatever it is. But I just wanted to put something on the table here. So they've now played 8 games against top 8 teams this year, and people might think that I'm critical of Essendon. I'm not that critical of them, but they've only won 1 game out of the 8 against top 8 teams this year. And we keep saying that it is a bit of a learning year for Brad Scott. So whether or not they make finals or not, clearly they want to make finals, but they're not ready yet to significantly challenge towards that prelim grand final stage. But the year that they've had so far has been a success. But I just wanted to throw just a couple of players just on the agenda in terms of this top 8 record. So Darcy Parish has now played 6 games against top 8 teams this year compared to what he's done against the bottom 10 teams, and his performance drops by 40% against top 8 teams. So he goes from being a top 10, top 15 player against the bottom 10 teams to being a bottom 100, or a bottom 200 sort of player against the top 8 teams. And
in what way?
Just his ball use.
Yep.
So the impact that he has when he actually does win the ball against the best, it's a bit sloppy, it's a bit messy, and there's no sort of real scoreboard.
More pressure.
And there's no sort of scoreboard return that he's been able to generate. And then someone behind the ball that I'm a big rap of, and I was actually quite surprised when I saw this, is Ridley. So Jordan Ridley's impact behind the ball drops by 36% against top 8 teams this year. So they've got one of their prime movers inside at centre bounce really not having any impact against the best, and they've probably got their prime piece along with Redmond and McGrath behind the ball who's not having any impact against the best as well. So We continually talk about that, the need to have that interceptor behind the ball. Ridley's probably their interceptor behind the ball, but he's just not getting it done against the best in the competition. So they get another challenge against a top 8 team this week against the Dogs. So it's just something just to keep an eye on with those two players there.
Guess who, Hoyne? Just quickly whip through the clues again, and then we'll take a couple of the guesses.
Yeah, so this team, since round 6, is the hardest team in the competition to move the ball against from back half to inside 50. The number 1 contest team in general play. The 3rd best turnover team in the competition, which we talk about at length, being the most important aspect of the game. And the 4th hardest team in the competition to score against when winning possession of the ball.
Who do you think, Kane?
I would have thought the Giants.
Giants is a great guess, but the Giants is not the answer. We'll dive into them after this one.
I'm going the Demons.
Yeah, and the D's is another good guess. It's been entertaining again here, Kane. Gerard just keeps on rattling off about 10 teams during the ad break, and he hasn't actually rattled off the correct answer.
Okay. Well,
do you want me to reveal look at the answer?
Yes, we do.
The team is Geelong.
Okay.
So that is Geelong.
The Cats are back, are they?
So the reason why, no, I'm not going to get it. No, I don't think that they're fully back.
You have written them.
Sounds like they're back with that set of numbers.
I don't think that they're fully back yet. But the reason why I just wanted to bring this up is a couple of things. So people are probably just going to assume that Geelong are back just based off the last 4 weeks. But that's why I wanted to bring up. It's since round 6. So their first 4 or 5 weeks was sloppy. They were sort of
when you wrote them off.
Uncharacteristic. Yeah, I'm not jumping absolutely back on them just yet. But they have sort of turned a corner over the last 12 weeks. So things have been building, and a little bit like Carlton as well with what we just talked about before. The expectation on Geelong when they actually got these blokes back, well, things were just going to click straight away, instantly. But, it does take a little bit of time. It takes sort of 3, 4, 5 weeks to, for everyone to actually reconnect again. So now we're actually starting to see that behind the ball. It's going to be interesting to see what they actually do at selection with Asava Radaglia this week, because I think they actually look better behind the ball with their premiership defence in there, minus Asava in there. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. The only reason I'm holding at the moment, and I'm not being stubborn, the only reason I'm holding is, what they've actually done outside of GMHBA this year. So they've belted up on teams other than the Giants this year down at Geelong this year. So they have a percentage of 174 down at Geelong, which is what they did last year.
Yep.
Okay, so exactly the same. But when they've left Geelong, last year when they left Geelong, they still had a percentage of 135 in the comp. So they belted up again on teams outside of Geelong. This year, that's only at 100% when they've left GMHBA.
So that's what needs to improve.
So I'm still sitting there going,
so it's the white shorts, it's the worry.
Well, let's go. Yeah. Well, let's see how it goes against Brisbane at the Gabba. I don't think that they're going to beat Brisbane at the Gabba. I think that's probably the hardest trip in footy. They don't need to beat Brisbane at the Gabba, but we just got to see whether or not this defensive sort of mechanism is in place against probably the most offensive juggernaut in the competition. So that's when I will start to change, but not just jumping.
All right, they've got a good solid month coming up. Just news in from GWS. Lockie Ash, good young player, high draft pick, having a very good year, has re-signed on a 2-year deal. So he's tied through until 2025. And an injury update from the depleted Port Adelaide. Jason Horne-Francis, my man, and Trent McKenzie are a test for this week. I believe they're pretty confident that McKenzie...
What about Zach Butters?
Zach Butters is good to go,
which
is good news. Hoyne, as we work through your 7 main talking points from the weekend, we move on to the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, so the Dogs. So this is probably a topic of conversation that you've been raising a little bit, Kane, since the Thursday night game. So I thought I'd just join in on the back of what you've sort of been talking about.
Just before you get to that, at the start of the year, because I've got some pushback on my rating of their list. I think their list is excellent. I think their list is as good as any. Where did you have their list strength?
So had their list high in terms of overall sheer talent. But, I've spoken a lot about this show about, those role players in the forward half of the ground being sort of really important in terms of how you can actually compete in the transition game, both offensively and defensively. And I thought that was the only gap in their game at the moment. And currently over the last 6 weeks, they've been one of the easiest teams in the competition to actually move the ball against. And I don't think that they've found, for a little bit of time, some role players in those areas, but not consistent enough to actually get a game week in, week out. So that's, the role playing discussions, I think, is the discussion at the Dogs that they'll be having to find to find, a Lockie Fogarty, a David Cunningham, a Matt Cottrell to be able to come in, and they're not household names. You have the talent there. Like this is over the last 6 weeks, Kane.
The Castagna role.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. So this is over the last 6 weeks, based off our new, player rating model, which is based off expectation. So they have 3 of the top 15 players in the competition that are performing above expectation over the last 6 weeks. They have 4 of the top 25, and they have 5 of the top 30 in the competition over the last 6 weeks. Yet, their clearance game is number 1 in the competition in terms of raw, clearance differential. Yet they're scoring the 11th most points from clearance in the competition in this period. Overall, they're scoring the 8th most points in the competition with 5 of the top 30 players in the competition. And and as I said before, their defensive game is just a shambles at the moment. So they're the second easiest team to score against when the ball goes inside 50.
Which has been the case for how long?
Years
and years. But we're not talking about 6
But
games.
those numbers would have blown out since Liam Jones was injured, surely.
They started to blow out before Liam Jones got injured. So Port Adelaide exposed it and Geelong exposed it.
So
then he got
ball
injured.
movement
Then he got
thing
injured.
as much
so
as
they
it
can't
is.
defend it. They can't. And we saw the Swans just attack corridor and score heavily out of the back half on Thursday night in a relatively low scoring game, and that was the gap in the game. The ball movement game was the reason why the Dogs got rolled. So, like as you said, Kane, it's been an issue for years, and they get a little bit fiery, about it at times. But that's the reality.
That's where you're at, and you're wasting a very good list. It is it's a very good list. Gerard's been big on the Giants, and rightly so. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so I just want to give them a bit of love at the moment, especially what they're doing defensively. We've spoken about their defence for a number of weeks now. It's just been so talented and such a stable group behind the ball, and no one is harder to actually score the ball. To score against when you go in. So the complete opposite to the Dogs.
They've been actually brilliant, even without Taylor, let alone with Taylor.
And now Taylor's back in is just, so this has just gone to another level. And that alone, so they come up against the most efficient forward 50 in the competition in Adelaide, at Adelaide on Saturday night, and they completely stifled them on Saturday night. There's a little bit of, there's a little bit of Richmond about what they're actually doing at the moment, and probably no surprise given, given who the coach is. So their clearance game at the moment is 12th in the competition over the last 6 weeks, very similar to what Richmond used to do. But their work outside of clearance is top 6 in the competition over the last 6 weeks, very similar to what Richmond do at the moment. And I just wanted to put this on the radar as well. So they've trailed at three-quarter time 12 times this year. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but they've trailed at three-quarter time 12 times this year. Only North Melbourne and West Coast have trailed more at three-quarter time this year. But they've still been able to win 4 games when trailing at three-quarter time. Only Collingwood have been able to do that, and Port Adelaide have been able to do that this year. So there is that belief, I think, within this team that they'll keep coming, they'll keep playing aggressive footy, they'll keep coming at you. They know that they're going to be able to hold up. But if they still give teams a look, 12 times is a lot to be able to give teams a look. I don't know how sustainable that is for the remaining 6 home and away games of the season.
Do you think they make the 8?
I think they get there. I think they get there. Yeah,
would be a good result. What about the Lions?
Yeah, so this is another interesting one. I mean, I know this has been dissected, and you can slice it and dice it however you want to slice it and dice it. But for me, I think when looking at what they did in the 90-minute period after that initial 10-minute burst, and then after the first up until the first 10 minutes of the fourth quarter, I thought that was close to almost perfection in terms of how they played in that 90-minute period, and the reason why I consider them the second best team in the competition behind Collingwood. So we've lauded what Melbourne have done defensively all year. That has not been their issue whatsoever. To score 103 points against Melbourne in 90 minutes is exceptional footy. To score 66 points off turnover in 90 minutes of footy is ridiculous footy. To win the inside 50 count against the hardest team to move the ball against across the season, to win it 46-30 in 90 minutes is a smashing. So I think they'll learn a lot from that last 20 minutes. They looked, I don't know what you thought, Kane, but when they were going full throttle, it looked like Melbourne couldn't keep up with them. It looked like that they were just too potent and too talented, and their system right across the ground just looked like it was breaking down, along with Collingwood, the best defence in the competition at the moment. But when they went into protection mode to almost try and ice the game, that's where, so that's when they sort of come unstuck. And it got me thinking when I was watching that on Friday night, like Collingwood when Collingwood go full throttle, and what Brisbane did on Friday night, it wasn't too dissimilar. Sort of Brisbane do it a slightly different way with more use by foot than what Collingwood do. But it was, it was as aggressive, and the returns were right there. So I think if you're a Brisbane supporter looking at that, that was the first game all year where that's been, a game decided by under 2 goals that you've played in. So you haven't been exposed into that sort of situation before until Friday night. So I think you'll learn a lot, from that loss. And, despite losing, I think that it's only enhanced, sort of their credentials in terms of where they sit outside of Collingwood relative to the rest of the competition.
Unless it costs them top 2, Hoyne. I still think they're going to overtake Port Adelaide by the end of the home and away season in second spot. But if they don't, you look back on that one and go, 24 points up with 7 minutes to go. What a missed opportunity. One that could cost them a big road trip. You're either playing Port Adelaide in Adelaide, or you're playing them at the Gabba where you just don't lose. Lastly, as we work through this, let's talk about the Saints.
Yeah, so I heard you mention last night about St Kilda.
Are they any better? So that I think you can spin it any way. You could say they're pretty even and pretty similar. You could say they're slightly better, or you could look at some numbers that say they're slightly worse. What's your how do you spin it?
It's purely off the numbers, Kane.
Yep.
So we're looking at it. So post round 6, after they were 5-1, compared to what they did in the second half of last year. And the numbers are absolutely identical in terms of what they've done post-bye compared to what they've done since round 7.
I'll tell you why they're better, though.
Because of the young players.
Because they've found Caminiti, unbelievable recruit. They've found
is he going that well, though, Caminiti, Gerard? Is he?
I think for a first-year player, he's going exceptionally well. I mean, he's not winning them games, so there's some work to do, obviously. But, gee, for a bloke who's come out of the VFL, I like him. I think he's one of the best I've seen to come out of there. He's got a lot of work to do, I grant you that. But the other one, of course, is the rising star favourite from you, Hoyne.
Owens, yeah. So they found a couple of youngsters.
They found him last year. Like he was looking at the goods last year, and you want to nail top 10 picks, so you get Filippo. So yeah, there is a bit more optimism with the couple of young players, but there's also some concerns over Max King's body. So yeah, I don't know, Hoyne. What do you think? So they're looking at their list forensically right now. They would diagnose what the problem is, and Ross was pretty open with that after the game. But from a list point of view, where are the holes? They just need just class?
Purely and simply, I'm going straight to the midfield group.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. I mean, that's where you first and foremost got to put the superstars in and then build from outside there. So
they told us that last year when they chose De Goey.
Yeah, and you can absolutely see why. I mean, De Goey would have been absolutely perfect for them. So whether or not that's Philippa who gets more opportunity next year, whether that's Owens that gets more opportunity next year, whoever it is, they need to find another 2-3 magnets in there that are going to be game breakers. And sort of right now, in all due respect, with Jack Steele, Brad Crouch, Seb Ross, those sorts of magnets in there. They're getting the job done in terms of a disposal point of view, but we don't look at disposal. We just purely look at the impact that you're having on matches, and there's no return that they get from those disposals that actually go on the scoreboard at the moment.
Kane, I think the question for them is, do they go the draft and take the long view, or do they try and short-circuit it and potentially get it wrong?
And that's an excellent point, and they've tried to short-circuit it before, and it didn't work. So if you can get De Goey and he fits it, good, go and have a crack. But don't settle for Darcy Parish, because you don't need Darcy Parish. Or someone, not a criticism towards Darcy Parish, they don't need another 35 accumulator who doesn't impact, I don't think, scoreboard impact. They've got enough
over
of
the years,
those.
The biggest mistakes I've seen is when clubs go for midfielders that are passed by midfielders they could have drafted in that particular year, 2 years on.
And don't think that you're probably better than what you actually are. I think that's sometimes when clubs actually do get themselves into a little bit of trouble, that they think that they're probably closer than what they actually are at the moment. You've just rated off some young talent there. They do have 4 or 5 guys under the age of 22 at the moment that, as a St Kilda supporter, that you would be excited about. I'd be going straight back to the draft again and actually trying to get high-end talent.
The bloody draft.